the first time I saw Caleb's eyes glint with that untamed fire. We were 10, wrestling in the dirt behind his dad's barn, laughing until our lungs burned. By 17, that fire had seared itself into my soul, and I was drowning in a love I couldn't name. Now, at 25, I stood in a sterile clinic, begging a doctor to erase the invisible scars Caleb's love had carved into me. My name is Ethan Harper, and I grew up in Willow Creek, a sleepy town in upstate New York where everyone knew your business before you did. Caleb was my neighbor, my best friend, the kid who'd sneak me comic books when my mom grounded me. He was the alpha of our little pack, bold, fearless, with a grin that could stop your heart. We were inseparable, two halves of a whole, until the summer after high school when everything changed. It was a humid July night, the kind where the air clung to your skin like a second shirt. We were sprawled on the roof of his dad's old Chevy, staring at a sky bloated with stars. Caleb turned to me, his voice low. "Ethan, you ever feel like you're hiding something from yourself?" His words hit like a punch. I knew what he meant because I felt it to a pull, a heat, a truth we'd both been dodging. I nodded, my throat tight, and when his hand grazed mine, I didn't pull away. That night, under the weight of 1,000 unspoken words, we kissed. It was clumsy, desperate, perfect. But perfection doesn't last in a town like Willow Creek. By morning, Caleb was different, distant. He avoided my eyes, his laughter forced. "We can't," he said, voice cracking. "This ain't us." But it was us. It was me, at least. I spent weeks replaying that kiss, chasing the ghost of his touch, while Caleb pulled further away. He started dating Sarah Mitchell, the mayor's daughter, all blonde hair and perfect smiles. I watched them at the town fair, his arm around her, and felt my heart splinter. I told myself it was fine, that I'd move on. But every time I saw him, the ache grew sharper. College was my escape. I got a scholarship to a small liberal arts school in Vermont, packed my bags, and left Willow Creek behind. I thought distance would dull the pain, but Caleb's shadow followed me. Late-night texts from him, "How's it going?" Man, felt like daggers. I'd stare at my phone, typing replies I never sent. I threw myself into my studies, into new friends, into fleeting hookups that never filled the void. I dated a guy named Mark for a year, a quiet artist with kind eyes. But every time he touched me, I saw Caleb. I was haunted. For years later, I came back to Willow Creek for my mom's funeral. She'd been sick for a while, and I'd been too caught up in my own mess to visit as often as I should have. The guilt was a weight I carried alone, until I saw Caleb at the service. He was broader now, his jaw sharper. But those eyes, God, those eyes still burned. He hugged me, too tight, too long, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Ethan." I didn't know if he meant for my mom or for us. Maybe both. That night, we ended up at O'Malley's, the only bar in town. Over cheap whiskey, Caleb talked about his life working at his dad's auto shop, still dating Sarah, still playing the part of the golden boy. But his voice cracked when he said, "I miss you." The words hung between us, heavy and dangerous. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to ask why he'd pushed me away. Instead, I drank until the room spun. When he offered to drive me home, I didn't say no. We didn't make it to my place. Somewhere along the dark country roads, he pulled over, and we were kissing again, hungrier than before. It was like the years hadn't passed, like we were still those boys on the Chevy, chasing something we couldn't name. But this time, it wasn't just a kiss. It was hands under shirts, breaths mingling, promises whispered in the dark. For one night, I let myself believe we could be more. Morning came, and so did reality. Caleb was gone before I woke up, leaving nothing but a note. "I'm sorry. I can't." I sat on the edge of my bed, the paper crumpled in my fist, and felt something break inside me. He was engaged to Sarah now, the town buzzing with the news. I was the fool who'd thought one night could change him. I left Willow Creek again. This time for good. I moved to Boston, got a job teaching history at a community college, and tried to build a life. But Caleb was a ghost I couldn't shake. Every date I went on, every laugh I shared, felt like a betrayal of that night. I started seeing a therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Ellis, who listened as I poured out my pain. "You're carrying him with you," she said. "You need to let go." But how do you let go of someone who's etched into your bones? That's when I heard about the clinic. It was a whisper in an online forum, a place in Boston that offered memory modification for trauma. It sounded like science fiction, but I was desperate. If I couldn't have Caleb, I didn't want to feel him anymore. I made an appointment, my hands shaking as I dialed. The doctor, a man with cold eyes and a crisp white coat, explained the procedure: targeted neural suppression, a way to dull the emotional weight of specific memories. "It won't erase him," he said, "but it'll make him matter less." I sat in the clinic's waiting room, my heart pounding. Was this what I wanted? To erase the marks Caleb had left on me? The thought felt like a betrayal, but so did loving someone who'd never loved me back. As the nurse called my name, I closed my eyes and saw Caleb's face, those eyes. That fire. I wasn't sure I could let him go. The clinic's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a stark contrast to the warmth of Caleb's memory. I followed the nurse down a sterile hallway, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. Every step felt like a march toward betrayal. But I was tired of waking up with his name on my lips. Tired of the ache that wouldn't fade. Dr. Patel, the cold-eyed doctor, sat me down in a room that smelled of antiseptic and regret. He explained the procedure again, his voice clinical, detached. "We'll map your neural pathways, isolate the emotional triggers tied to this person, and suppress them. You'll still remember him, but the pain will be muted." Muted. The word felt wrong, like dulling a song that had defined my life. I signed the consent form anyway, my signature shaky. The procedure was quick. They strapped electrodes to my scalp, showed me photos of Caleb. I'd brought snapshots from our childhood. That night on the Chevy, a blurry selfie from O'Malley's. Each image flashed on a screen, and I felt a jolt, like my heart was being rewired. When it was over, I felt empty. Not better, just hollow. Dr. Patel said it would take time to adjust, but as I left the clinic, Boston's gray streets felt grayer. For a while, it worked. I could think of Caleb without my chest tightening. I started dating again, a guy named Lucas who taught yoga and had a laugh like summer. We went to art galleries, cooked dinners together, and I told myself I was moving on. But late at night, when Lucas slept beside me, I'd stare at the ceiling, searching for the fire Caleb's memory used to ignite. It was gone, but so was a piece of me. 6 months later, I got a call from Willow Creek. It was Caleb's sister, Mia, her voice trembling. "Ethan, it's Caleb. He's in the hospital." My stomach dropped. The procedure hadn't erased my instinct to care. I drove back to Willow Creek, the 4-hour trip a blur of guilt and dread. Mia met me at the hospital, her eyes red. "Car accident," she said. "He's stable, but he's been asking for you." Seeing Caleb in that hospital bed broke something in me. His face was bruised, his arm in a cast, but those eyes still burned, even through the pain. "Ethan," he whispered, and my name in his voice cracked the walls I'd built. I sat beside him, my hand hovering over his, afraid to touch. "I messed up," he said. "I've been messing up since that night on the Chevy." I wanted to scream at him, to demand why he'd pushed me away, why he'd chosen Sarah, why he'd let me drown in this alone. But his vulnerability stopped me. He told me about the accident drunk, speeding, trying to outrun his own thoughts. He'd broken off his engagement with Sarah months ago, unable to keep pretending. "I kept seeing you," he said, every time I closed my eyes. I stayed in Willow Creek for a week, helping Mia with Caleb's recovery. We didn't talk about us, but every glance, every accidental touch, felt like a spark. I told myself it was the procedure wearing off, that I was imagining the pull. But when Caleb grabbed my hand one night, his grip desperate, and said, "I don't want to lose you again," I felt the fire reignite. I went back to Boston, torn. Lucas noticed the change in me, the way I'd drift off mid-conversation. "You're not here," he said one night, his voice soft but firm. He was right. I ended things with him, hating myself for hurting someone so kind. I threw myself into work, into therapy, trying to make sense of the chaos Caleb had stirred up again. Dr. Ellis warned me about emotional rebound. The procedure could suppress feelings, but it couldn't erase love. "You have to decide what you want," she said, "not what you think you should want." I avoided Caleb's calls for weeks, each voicemail a knife in my chest. But one evening, as I walked home through Boston's autumn streets, my phone buzzed with a text. "I'm in town. Can we talk?" My heart raced. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near my apartment. He looked different, thinner, haunted, but still devastatingly Caleb. He told me he'd moved to Albany, trying to start over, but he couldn't stop thinking about me. I was scared, he admitted. "Back then, I thought loving you would ruin everything, but losing you did that instead." We talked for hours, the coffee shop emptying around us. He reached for my hand, and this time, I didn't pull away. When he kissed me, it was like the first time, clumsy, desperate, perfect. But as we walked back to my apartment, his hand in mine, I felt the weight of the clinic's procedure. Could I trust this? Could I trust him? That night in my apartment, Caleb and I didn't sleep. We lay on my couch, tangled in each other, talking about everything we'd buried. He told me about the pressure he'd felt in Willow Creek to be the perfect son, the perfect man, the perfect straight guy. "I thought I could fix myself," he said, his voice raw. "But all I did was break us." I told him about the clinic, the procedure, the way I tried to erase him. His face fell, and for a moment, I thought he'd pull away again. Instead, he pulled me closer. "I'm sorry I made you feel like you needed that," he whispered. I wanted to believe him, but trust was a fragile thing, and mine was cracked. Over the next few weeks, Caleb stayed in Boston. He got a job at a garage, and we fell into a rhythm: dinners together, walks through the city, quiet nights where we didn't need words. It felt like a dream, but dreams have a way of cracking under pressure. Willow Creek wasn't done with us. Sarah, Caleb's ex, started texting him, begging him to come back. "She's struggling," he told me, guilt in his eyes. "Her dad's putting pressure on her to fix things with me." I hated how her name made my stomach twist. I hated that I was jealous of someone who was hurting. But most of all, I hated that Caleb seemed torn. One night, after a tense dinner where he'd been glued to his phone, I snapped. "Are you going back to her?" I asked, my voice shaking. He looked at me, stunned, then angry. "You think I'd do that to you? After everything?" We fought, loud and raw, until he stormed out, leaving me alone with my doubts. For days, we didn't speak. I threw myself into work, grading papers until my eyes burned, trying to drown out the silence. Dr. Ellis noticed the change in our sessions. "You're punishing yourself for loving him," she said. "But love isn't a crime, Ethan." Her words stung because they were true. I was punishing myself for wanting something I wasn't sure I could have. Then Caleb showed up at my door, rain-soaked and desperate. "I told Sarah it's over," he said. "For good. I choose you." His words were a lifeline, but I was scared to grab it. We talked all night, laying bare our fears, our hopes, our scars. He admitted he'd been afraid of what loving me meant, not just for him, but for us in a world that wasn't always kind. I admitted I was afraid of being hurt again. But as dawn broke, we made a pact. We'd face it together. Life with Caleb wasn't perfect. There were whispers when we visited Willow Creek, sideways glances from old neighbors. But there were also moments of joy, lazy Sundays in bed. His laugh when I burned dinner. The way he'd hold my hand like he was afraid I'd vanish. We were building something. Fragile but real. Then came the letter. It was from the clinic. A follow-up survey about the procedure. Reading it brought back the memory of that sterile room. The electrodes. The hollow feeling. I hadn't told Caleb the full truth that the procedure wasn't permanent. That the emotions could resurface if triggered. I didn't want him to know how desperate I'd been. But secrets have a way of unraveling. One evening, as we were cooking dinner, Caleb found the letter on my desk. "What's this?" he asked, his voice sharp. I froze, the knife in my hand trembling. I tried to explain, but the words came out wrong. Defensive. "You tried to erase me," he asked, his voice breaking. "After everything. You thought that was the answer." He left before I could stop him, the door slamming like a gunshot. I spent the next day in a daze, replaying our fight. I called Dr. Patel, demanding answers. He was calm, clinical. "The procedure doesn't erase love," he said. "It just buries it. You're feeling what was always there." I hung up, angry at him, at myself, at Caleb. I wanted to fix this, but I didn't know how. That night, I drove to Albany, to Caleb's new apartment. He opened the door, his eyes tired but soft. "I don't want to lose you," I said, my voice cracking. "Not again." He let me in, and we really talked about the pain we'd caused each other, the fear that kept us running. It wasn't easy, but it was honest. Caleb and I sat on his worn-out couch, the silence between us heavy but not hostile. He told me about the years we'd been apart, how he'd tried to be someone he wasn't, how every step away from me had felt like a betrayal of himself. "I was a coward," he said, his voice low. "I thought I could outrun this. But it's you, Ethan. It's always been you." I told him about the clinic, the desperation that had driven me there, the hollow ache that followed. "I thought I could stop loving you," I admitted. "But it's like trying to stop breathing." He reached for my hand, his grip steady, and for the first time, I felt like we were on the same page. We decided to start over, not as the kids we'd been, but as the men we were now, flawed, scared, but willing to try. We spent the next few months building something real. Caleb moved to Boston permanently, and we found a small apartment together, a place filled with our laughter and our fights. We were learning each other again, navigating the messiness of love in a world that didn't always understand. But Willow Creek wasn't done with us. Caleb's dad, a gruff man who'd always seen his son as the town's golden boy, came to visit. He didn't know about us. Not really. But he sensed something. Over dinner, he made a comment about settling down with a nice girl, and I saw Caleb's jaw tighten. I braced myself for him to brush it off, to play the part again. Instead, he looked his dad in the eye and said, "I'm with Ethan. That's my life now." The silence that followed was deafening. His dad's face hardened, and he left without another word. Caleb didn't cry, but I saw the weight of it in his eyes. That night, he held me tighter than ever, and I realized we were fighting for more than just us. We were fighting for the right to exist as we were. The town's reaction was mixed. Some old friends reached out, supportive but cautious. Others, like Sarah's family, cut us off completely. We got stares at the grocery store, whispers at the diner. But there were also allies, Mia, who'd always known, and a few others who surprised us with their kindness. It wasn't easy, but it was ours. One evening, as we walked through Boston's public garden, Caleb stopped under a blooming cherry tree. The petals fell around us, soft and fleeting, and he pulled me close. "I'm not running anymore," he said. "This is where I want to be." I kissed him, right there in the open, and for the first time, I didn't care who saw. But the clinic's shadow lingered. I started having dreams, vivid, painful flashes of Caleb, the procedure, the fear of losing him. Dr. Ellis said it was my brain processing the trauma, but it felt like a warning. I didn't tell Caleb, not wanting to worry him, but he noticed my restlessness. "Talk to me," he said one night, his voice gentle but firm. I broke down, confessing the dreams, the fear that this happiness was temporary. He listened, then pulled me into his arms. "We're not temporary," he said. "Not anymore." We decided to face the past head-on. We drove back to Willow Creek for the town's annual spring festival, determined to show up as ourselves. It was a risk, but we were tired of hiding. We walked hand in hand, ignoring the stares, the whispers. Some people smiled, others turned away, but we kept going. At the festival's bonfire, Caleb pulled me into a slow dance, his arms steady around me. For the first time, I felt free. The bonfire's glow lit up Caleb's face, his eyes reflecting the flames and something deeper hope. As we danced, I felt the weight of Willow Creek's judgment lift, replaced by the warmth of his hand in mine. For one night, we weren't the town scandal. We were just Ethan and Caleb, two people in love. But love doesn't erase the past. Back in Boston, the dreams got worse. I'd wake up gasping, Caleb's name on my lips, the clinic's sterile room haunting me. I finally told Dr. Ellis everything, and she suggested a follow-up with Dr. Patel. "You need closure," she said. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I was tired of running from my own mind. Caleb came with me to the clinic. Dr. Patel was surprised to see us together, his cold eyes softening slightly. "The procedure wasn't meant to erase love," he said, echoing his earlier words. "It was meant to help you live with it." He offered a reversal process, something experimental that could restore the emotional connections I'd suppressed. Caleb squeezed my hand, his voice steady. "Whatever you choose, I'm here." I didn't decide right away. We talked about it for days, weighing the risks. The procedure had dulled my pain, but it had also dulled my joy. I wanted to feel Caleb fully, even if it hurt. So I went back, electrodes on my scalp again, Caleb holding my hand through every jolt. When it was over, I felt raw, like a wound reopened. But I also felt alive. The first time I looked at Caleb after the reversal, it was like seeing him for the first time. The fire in his eyes was brighter, the weight of his touch heavier. We cried, laughed, held each other until the sun rose. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. We built a life together, piece by piece. Caleb started therapy, working through his own fears. I kept teaching, finding joy in my students' curiosity. We faced challenges, disapproving colleagues, family tensions, the occasional cruel comment. But we also found strength in each other, in the quiet moments when it was just us against the world. Years later, we went back to Willow Creek for Mia's wedding. The town had changed, softened by time and new faces. Caleb's dad was there, older now, quieter. He didn't say much, but he shook my hand, his grip firm. It wasn't acceptance, not fully, but it was a start. As we stood by the same barn where we'd wrestled as kids, Caleb pulled me close. "I'm glad you didn't erase me," he said, his voice thick. I smiled, my heart full. "I couldn't. You're too stubborn." Our love wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy, hard won, scarred by years of pain and fear. But it was ours, and it was enough. The marks Caleb left on me weren't something to erase, they were proof we'd survived, proof we'd chosen each other. And in the end, that was the only truth that mattered.